The steel barrel of the Winchester pressed cold against Zachary Owens's shoulder as he watched the dust cloud rise from the eastern road. Knowing whoever approached his ranch that sweltering August afternoon in 1879 would either be the answer to his prayers or another disappointment in a long line of them. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on his weathered face, lines deepening around his eyes as he squinted toward the approaching wagon, his 7-year-old niece Sarah tugging at his shirt with small, insistent fingers. "Uncle Zach, is that her? Is that the teacher?" Sarah's voice carried the hopeful lilt of a child who had seen too many tutors come and go in the past 6 months, none of them lasting more than a week on the isolated ranch 20 miles outside Austin, Texas. Zachary lowered the rifle, leaning it against the porch railing. "Maybe, little one. Maybe this time we will find someone who sticks around." He tried to keep the skepticism from his voice, but at 28 years old, he had learned that life rarely delivered what you needed when you needed it most. His sister's death the previous winter had left him guardian to Sarah, a responsibility he had accepted without hesitation, despite knowing absolutely nothing about raising a young girl, let alone educating one. The wagon drew closer, and Zachary could make out the driver, old Pete from the general store in town, and beside him sat a woman in a simple gray traveling dress, her posture straight despite the jarring ride over the rutted road. Even from a distance, there was something different about her, something that made Zachary's chest tighten inexplicably. She held a parasol against the sun, but as the wagon pulled into the yard, she collapsed it with efficient movements, revealing auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a face that was not classically beautiful but striking in its intelligence and determination. "Afternoon, Zach," Pete called out, pulling the horses to a stop near the water trough. "Brought you Miss Winifred Garrison from Boston. Came in on the morning stage." The woman stood before Pete could assist her, gathering her skirts and climbing down from the wagon with more grace than Zachary expected after such a journey. She was younger than he had anticipated, perhaps 25 or 26, with green eyes that assessed everything around her with quick, analytical precision. Those eyes landed on him, and Zachary felt something shift inside his chest, like a key turning in a lock he had not known existed. "Mr. Owens," she said, her voice clear and educated without being affected. She extended a gloved hand like a man would, direct and confident. "I am Winifred Garrison. I received your advertisement for a tutor through the teaching bureau in Boston." Zachary wiped his palm on his trousers before taking her hand, surprised by the firm grip. "Miss Garrison, that is quite a journey from Massachusetts. I hope you understand what you are getting into. This is not Boston. We are 20 miles from the nearest town, and the work is not just teaching. Life out here requires everyone to pitch in." Something flickered in her eyes, amusement perhaps, or challenge. "Mr. Owens, I assure you I did not travel 2,000 miles to turn around at the first mention of hard work. I am well aware of what frontier life entails." "Now, might I meet my student?" Sarah had been hiding behind Zachary's leg, but at the mention of herself she stepped forward shyly. "I am Sarah. I am 7 3/4. The last teacher said I was unteachable, but she was mean and smelled like mothballs." Winifred's face transformed with a smile that made Zachary's breath catch. She knelt down to Sarah's level, heedless of the dust on her gray dress. "Sarah, that is a beautiful name, and I promise you I smell nothing like mothballs. I smell like the rose water my grandmother made, which I have carried all the way from Boston just for special occasions. Would you like to smell it?" Sarah nodded eagerly, and Winifred produced a small vial from her bag, dabbing a tiny bit on the girl's wrist. Sarah's face lit up with delight, and just like that, Zachary watched his guarded niece begin to open up to this stranger from the east. "Thank you for bringing her, Pete," Zachary said, pulling his attention away from the woman and child. He handed Pete a few coins. "I appreciate it." "No trouble at all. Good luck, Miss Garrison. You are going to need it." Pete tipped his hat and climbed back onto the wagon, leaving them in a small cloud of dust as he departed. Zachary picked up Winifred's trunk and carpetbag, both surprisingly heavy. "The house is not much, but it is clean. My sister, Sarah's mother, kept it well before she passed. I have done my best to maintain her standards." "I am sorry for your loss," Winifred said quietly as they walked toward the house, Sarah now holding the teacher's hand as if they had known each other for years. Sarah mentioned her mother died last winter. Fever took her, fast and cruel. Their father, my brother-in-law, died 2 years before that when his horse threw him breaking mustangs. Sarah has had more loss in her short life than most see in a lifetime. Zachary's voice was rough with emotion he usually kept buried deep. The house was a solid structure, built from local limestone with a wide porch that provided shade during the brutal summer months. Inside, it was sparse but tidy, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, 2 bedrooms and a small room that Zachary had cleared out for Sarah's lessons. He had added bookshelves built from scrap lumber, a proper desk he had commissioned from the carpenter in Austin, and a chalkboard he had ordered from a catalog. Spending money he could not really afford because Sarah's education mattered more than his comfort. "This will be your room," Zachary said, opening the door to the smaller bedroom. It had belonged to his sister, and he had cleaned it thoroughly, putting fresh linens on the bed and wildflowers in a jar on the small dresser. "It is not fancy, but the roof does not leak, and the window faces east so you will get morning light." Winifred set her bag down and turned to look at him, her expression softening. "It is perfect, Mr. Owens. More than I expected, honestly. Thank you. Meals are at dawn, noon, and dusk. I have a ranch hand, Miguel, who helps with the cattle and horses. He is a good man, married with children in town. He rides out most days. We raise cattle mostly, some horses. The work keeps me out most days from sunup to sundown, which is why Sarah needs someone dedicated to her education." Zachary found himself explaining more than necessary, unsettled by Winifred's steady gaze. "What about you, Mr. Owens? Did you have much schooling?" she asked, and there was no judgment in her voice, only curiosity. "Some. My mother taught me to read and write before she died. My father was not much for book learning after that, but I can manage accounts and read well enough. My sister was the educated one. She went to a finishing school in San Antonio before she married. She always wanted better for Sarah." "And you want that too," Winifred said. It was not a question. "More than anything." The words came out more intensely than Zachary intended, and he cleared his throat. "I will let you settle in. Sarah, show Miss Garrison where everything is, then come help me with evening chores." As Zachary stepped out onto the porch, he heard Sarah's excited chatter and Winifred's patient responses, and something in his chest unwound slightly. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this Eastern woman with the determined chin and kind eyes would stay. The first week passed in a rhythm that surprised everyone. Winifred proved to be nothing like the previous tutors, who had either been too soft and let Sarah run wild, or too strict and made the girl stubborn and defiant. Winifred found a middle path, firm but warm, structured but flexible. She started each morning with reading, moved to mathematics, then history and science, always weaving in practical applications that made sense on a ranch. If you have 20 head of cattle and each needs 20 pounds of feed per week, how much feed do you need total? Winifred asked one morning, and Sarah actually engaged with the problem because it connected to her world. But what surprised Zachary most was how Winifred integrated herself into the life of the ranch beyond just teaching. The second afternoon, she emerged from the house in a simpler calico dress, her sleeves rolled up, and announced she would help with the garden since it was clearly being neglected. "You do not need to do that," Zachary protested. "I hired you to teach Sarah, not work the land." "Mr. Owens, I am living here and eating your food. The least I can do is contribute. Besides, I grew up helping my grandmother in her garden. I find it relaxing." She had already grabbed a hoe and was walking toward the sad patch of vegetables behind the house. By the end of that first week, the garden looked transformed. Neat rows of thriving plants where before there had been chaos. Winifred had also taken over the cooking, and Zachary found himself actually looking forward to meals instead of dreading the burned beans and tough meat that were his specialties. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked one evening over a meal of perfectly seasoned venison stew with vegetables and biscuits that melted in his mouth. "My grandmother again. She believed every woman should know how to make a good meal from whatever was available. It is a puzzle, really, cooking. Finding the right combinations and timing." Winifred smiled, and Zachary noticed the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, the way a few strands of hair had escaped her bun to curl around her face in the humid evening air. Sarah, sitting between them, looked happier than Zachary had seen her since her mother died. She chattered about what she had learned that day, about the book Winifred was reading to her in the evenings, about the herbs they were drying for winter. The house felt alive again, filled with feminine energy that had been absent too long. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, Zachary found Winifred on the porch, looking up at the stars scattered across the vast Texas sky like diamonds on black velvet. "I have never seen so many stars," she said softly. "In Boston, you can barely see them through the smoke and lights." Zachary leaned against the porch railing, maintaining a respectful distance but drawn to her presence like a moth to flame. "It is one of the things I love about this place. No matter how hard the day, the stars remind you there is something bigger out there." "Why did you put the advertisement in a Boston paper?" Winifred asked, turning to look at him. "Surely there were women closer who could teach Sarah." "I tried locally first. 6 different women came and left. Some could not handle the isolation. Some wanted more money than I could pay. Some just did not connect with Sarah. A friend suggested I try back east, said women there were more educated and might see it as an adventure." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Why did you answer it? What made you want to leave everything behind and come to Texas?" Winifred was quiet for a long moment, and Zachary thought maybe he had overstepped, but then she spoke. "I was engaged to be married to a man my father chose. A banker, very respectable, very boring, and very convinced that education beyond basic literacy was wasted on women. When I suggested I might want to continue teaching after marriage, he laughed. So I broke the engagement, which scandalized my family. Your advertisement arrived at the teaching bureau the very week I was looking for a way to start over somewhere my reputation would not precede me." "His loss," Zachary said quietly, and meant it. Winifred turned to him with surprise, and in the moonlight, her face was luminous. "You do not think I was foolish to give up security for principles. I think you were brave. Security at the cost of who you are is not security at all. It is a prison." The words hung between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to examine. The weeks rolled into months, and autumn arrived with cooler temperatures and the back-breaking work of preparing the ranch for winter. Zachary found himself increasingly aware of Winifred, of the way she moved through the house and garden, of her laughter when Sarah said something clever, of the fierce concentration on her face when she was planning lessons or reading in the evening. He had not expected to feel this way, had not thought his heart capable of it after losing so many people he loved. But Winifred was unlike anyone he had ever met. She was educated but not condescending, strong but not harsh, independent but not cold. She asked him about ranch management with genuine interest, listened to his concerns about water rights and cattle prices, offered insights that were surprisingly useful. One October morning, a group of cattle rustlers passed through the area, and Zachary had to ride out with Miguel and 2 other ranchers to track them down. Before he left, he pressed his old revolver into Winifred's hands. "You know how to use this?" he asked. She checked the cylinder with practiced ease, surprising him. "My father taught me before he decided women should not have opinions. I am a decent shot. Keep Sarah inside until I get back. Lock the doors. If anyone comes who is not me or Miguel, do not hesitate." Zachary's hand lingered on hers for a moment, his eyes intense. "Please be safe." "You too," she said softly, and the concern in her voice made his heart race. He was gone 3 days, and they were the longest days of his life. Not because of the danger or the hard riding, but because he realized somewhere on that cold trail that he had fallen completely in love with Winifred Garrison, and the thought of something happening to her was unbearable. When he rode back into the ranch yard, exhausted and dirty, the front door flew open and Sarah ran out, followed more slowly by Winifred. Sarah crashed into him as he dismounted, and he hugged her tight, but his eyes were on Winifred, drinking in the sight of her safe and whole. "We got the rustlers. They are on their way to the marshal in Austin," he said, his voice rough with fatigue. "Come inside." "I have stew hot and coffee ready," Winifred said, her hands twisting in her apron in a rare show of nervousness. "You look exhausted." That evening, after Sarah was asleep and Zachary had washed the trail dust away, he found Winifred again on the porch. The November air was cool, and she had wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. "You were worried," he said, standing beside her. "Of course I was worried. Sarah was terrified something would happen to you. She has already lost so much." Winifred's voice was carefully controlled, but Zachary heard the tremor beneath. "And you? Were you afraid for me or just for Sarah's sake?" He did not know where the boldness came from, but 3 days of thinking about death and loss had stripped away his caution. Winifred turned to face him, her green eyes wide in the lamplight spilling from the window. "I was terrified," she whispered, "and not just for Sarah." Zachary reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked one of those escaped curls behind her ear. "Winifred, I did not expect this, did not plan for it. But I cannot pretend any more that you are just Sarah's tutor. You have become so much more, to both of us." "Zachary," she breathed, and hearing his given name from her lips was like a benediction. "I should not. You are my employer. It is not proper." "Since when have you cared about what is proper?" he asked with a slight smile. "You left your entire life behind because proper was trying to cage you." She laughed softly, and then his hands were cupping her face and his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her hands gripping his shirt. The kiss tasted like hope and coffee and coming home, and when they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "This complicates things," Winifred said, but she was smiling. "The best things usually do," Zachary replied, resting his forehead against hers. They did not rush into anything, both aware of Sarah's presence and the proprieties that still mattered in their small community. But their relationship shifted, deepened. They stole moments together, conversations on the porch after Sarah slept, his hand finding hers when they walked to check the garden, her fingers lingering on his shoulder when she poured his coffee. Sarah noticed, of course. Children always did. One morning in December, she looked between them at breakfast and announced, "You love each other, like Mama and Papa did." Zachary nearly choked on his coffee, but Winifred reached over and took Sarah's hand. "Would that bother you if we did?" Sarah considered seriously. "Will you leave if you marry Uncle Zach? Ladies usually leave when they get married." "Not if I am marrying someone who is already here," Winifred said gently. "This is my home now, Sarah. I am not going anywhere." "Then I think it is good. Uncle Zach smiles now and you look happy. And maybe I could be in the wedding." Sarah's face lit up with excitement. Zachary looked at Winifred over his niece's head, his heart so full it hurt. "Is that a proposal, Miss Garrison?" "I believe it is, Mr. Owens, though you are welcome to do it properly if you prefer." Her eyes sparkled with mischief and love. That evening, Zachary did it properly. He had Miguel bring a small box from town that he had commissioned weeks ago, a simple gold band with a small emerald that matched Winifred's eyes. He got down on one knee in the parlor while Sarah watched with barely contained glee. "Winifred Garrison, you came to Texas to teach my niece, but you taught me something far more important. You taught me that my heart was not as broken as I thought, that I could love again, that life offers second chances if you are brave enough to take them. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Sarah's aunt and help me build a life here?" Tears streamed down Winifred's face as she nodded. "Yes. Yes to all of it. I love you, Zachary Owens. I love the man you are, the guardian you have become, the life we are building together. Yes." The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, and Sarah cheered as they kissed, this time with nothing held back, a promise and a beginning. They married in January of 1880 in the small church in Austin, with Miguel and his family and a few neighboring ranchers as witnesses. Winifred wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Sarah stood beside her as a junior attendant in a new blue dress, holding a bouquet of winter flowers. Zachary wore his Sunday best and could not stop smiling as Winifred walked down the short aisle toward him. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, the preacher speaking about love and commitment and the ways God brought people together. When Zachary kissed his bride, he felt a completeness he had not known was possible. This woman who had traveled across a continent for a teaching position had instead found a home and given him one in return. The wedding celebration was held at the ranch, with neighbors bringing food and music. Miguel played guitar while his wife sang, and couples danced in the yard under strings of lanterns Winifred had hung. Sarah danced with other children, her laughter ringing out clear and joyful. Zachary held Winifred close as they swayed to the music, her head resting on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" he murmured into her hair. "Happier than I have ever been," she replied. "This is everything I did not know I wanted, a real partnership, a family, a purpose beyond just survival." "You have given me those same things," Zachary said. "Sarah has flourished under your care. The ranch runs better. I am a better man because of you." The guests eventually departed, and Sarah was put to bed, still chattering excitedly about the wedding. Finally alone, Zachary carried Winifred over the threshold of their shared bedroom, the one that had been his but was now theirs. He set her down gently, his hands trembling slightly. "Are you nervous?" she asked, touching his face. "Terrified," he admitted. "That I will disappoint you, that this happiness cannot last." "Zachary, look at me." She waited until his eyes met hers. "We will have hard times. This is Texas, and life is unpredictable. But we face it together now. You could never disappoint me. You are everything I dreamed of in those long Boston nights when I thought I would never find someone who saw me as an equal." He kissed her then, deeply, and what followed was tender and passionate, a joining of not just bodies but souls, two people who had found each other against all odds and were determined to build something lasting. The winter passed into spring, and life settled into new rhythms. Winifred continued teaching Sarah each morning, but now she also helped Zachary with ranch accounts, her head for numbers proving invaluable. She suggested improvements to water management that increased their grazing capacity. She negotiated with the bank for a better loan rate, her Eastern education and articulate manner impressing the Austin bankers. But she also remained Sarah's teacher and growing into the role of mother. She plaited the girl's hair each morning, told her stories at night, tended her scrapes and soothed her fears. Sarah bloomed under the combined attention, growing more confident and curious, her reading advancing rapidly. By summer, Winifred was pregnant, the realization coming one hot July morning when she could not keep down breakfast. Zachary was beside himself with worry and joy, hovering over her until she laughingly pushed him away to do his work. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Zachary. I am not made of glass. You are precious cargo," he insisted. "Both of you are." Sarah was thrilled at the prospect of a baby brother or sister, asking endless questions that Winifred answered honestly but age-appropriately, using it as a teaching opportunity about biology and responsibility. The pregnancy progressed well through the fall. Winifred continued her routines with minor modifications, though Zachary tried to insist she rest more. She ignored him cheerfully, maintaining that activity was healthy and sitting around would drive her mad. In February of 1881, on a cold but clear night, Winifred's labor began. Zachary rode like fury to fetch the midwife from Austin, while Miguel's wife stayed with Winifred and Sarah. By the time Zachary returned with Mrs. Henderson, the experienced midwife who had delivered half the babies in Travis County, the labor was progressing rapidly. Sarah stayed with Miguel's family while the long night wore on. Zachary held Winifred's hand, wiped her forehead, murmured encouragement even as his heart twisted with every sound of pain she made. This was the cost of love, he realized, this terrible vulnerability of having your heart walking around outside your body. Dawn was breaking when the baby finally arrived, a squalling, red-faced boy with a surprising amount of dark hair and lungs that testified to excellent health. Mrs. Henderson cleaned him up and placed him in Winifred's arms, and Zachary watched his wife's face transform with wonder and exhaustion and overwhelming love. "He is perfect," Winifred whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Zachary, look at what we made." Zachary bent to kiss her forehead, then gently touched his son's tiny hand, marveling when the little fingers wrapped around his calloused one. "He is beautiful. You are amazing. I love you so much." They named him William Thomas Owens, after both their fathers, and when Sarah was finally allowed to meet her new cousin, she was reverent and gentle, touching the baby's head with one careful finger. "He is so small," she breathed. "Was I that small once? You were," Winifred confirmed. "And your mama loved you just as much as I love William. You are still my girl, Sarah. This baby does not change that. Our family is just bigger now." The years that followed were full of the hard work and small joys that made up a life. William grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy who followed his father everywhere, determined to be a rancher like him. Sarah continued her education, eventually graduating from Winifred's tutelage to attend the newly established school in Austin, riding in with Miguel each day and staying with his family during the week, coming home on weekends. When Sarah was 15 and William 4, Winifred gave birth to twin girls, Grace Ann and Emma Louise, who arrived 6 weeks early during a spring thunderstorm, causing absolute chaos but ultimately emerging healthy if small. Zachary joked that his wife was trying to match the ranch's productivity, which earned him a thrown pillow and a laugh. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Zachary handled the cattle and horses, while Winifred managed the finances and correspondence. They became known throughout Travis County as a formidable team, and their home was a gathering place for neighbors and friends, always welcoming, always warm. Sarah grew into a beautiful and intelligent young woman, eventually leaving to attend a teaching college in San Antonio, determined to follow in Winifred's footsteps. At her graduation in 1889, Winifred and Zachary sat in the audience with William and the twins, bursting with pride as Sarah gave a speech about the importance of education for women and thanked her aunt for showing her what was possible. "You did that," Zachary whispered to Winifred. "You gave her the tools and the confidence to become who she is meant to be." "We did that," Winifred corrected, squeezing his hand. "You gave her love and stability and a home. I just taught her to read." "You taught her so much more than that," Zachary said, and it was true. Winifred had taught them all more than books. She had taught them about resilience, about partnership, about building a life based on respect and love rather than convention and expectation. The years continued their steady march. William grew tall and strong like his father, taking over more ranch responsibilities as Zachary's hair turned gray. The twins were like wildfire, impossible to contain, brilliant and mischievous in equal measure. They kept everyone on their toes, especially when they decided they wanted to learn to break horses despite Winifred's concerns. "They are your daughters," Zachary said with amusement when the 12-year-old girls climbed on horses for the first time. Stubborn and determined and completely convinced they can do anything they set their minds to. "I wonder where they get that," Winifred replied dryly, but she watched with pride as her daughters learned to ride and rope, as comfortable in the saddle as they were with books. Sarah returned to Austin after college, taking a position at the growing school, and eventually marrying a young lawyer who appreciated her intelligence and independence. At her wedding in 1891, she asked Winifred to stand with her, and there was not a dry eye in the church when she told everyone assembled that Winifred had saved her life by teaching her to believe in herself. As the century turned toward its close, Zachary and Winifred found themselves blessed beyond measure. Their children were healthy and happy, pursuing their own paths. The ranch was successful and stable. They had built something lasting, a legacy of love and hard work and partnership. One evening in the spring of 1895, they sat on the porch as they had so many thousands of times before, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple. William was out checking the south fence line. The twins were inside doing homework under protest. The house was full of the sounds of life and family. Winifred, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, leaned against Zachary's shoulder. He had aged well, his face lined by sun and wind but his blue eyes still clear and bright. His arm came around her naturally, a gesture repeated so often it was like breathing. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked. "Answering that advertisement, giving up your life in Boston?" Winifred turned to look at him, touching his weathered face with gentle fingers. "Not for a single moment." "That was not a life, Zachary. That was an existence. This is living. You, the children, the ranch, all of it. This is everything I was meant to be and do." "I think about that day you arrived," Zachary said. "I was so desperate for help with Sarah, and you stepped out of that wagon looking so determined and capable. I never imagined you would become my whole world." "I was terrified," Winifred admitted. "I had never been west of Pennsylvania. Texas might as well have been the moon. But I saw something in your advertisement, something genuine and honest. You were not looking for a servant or decoration. You wanted someone to educate your niece because you loved her enough to want better for her. That mattered to me. Best decision I ever made, placing that advertisement, Zachary said. Well, second best. The best was asking you to marry me. I might argue that the best decision was saying yes, Winifred teased, but I suppose we can call it a tie. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, the same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their love story all those years ago. Inside, they could hear the twins laughing at something, William's boots on the porch steps as he returned from his work. We did good, did we not? Zachary asked softly. With the kids, with the ranch, with all of it, we did better than good, Winifred assured him. We built a family and a home. We raised children who know they are loved and capable. We created a partnership based on respect and equality. Not many people can say that, especially out here where most marriages are still arranged for convenience rather than love. William came up onto the porch, tall and solid at 14, every inch his father's son. South fence needs some repair, but it will hold until morning. I can handle it after breakfast. Thank you, son, Zachary said. You are becoming quite the rancher. I had a good teacher, William replied, then added with a grin, both of you. Ma is as good with cattle management as you are, Pa, better with the numbers anyway. After William went inside to wash up for supper, Winifred laughed softly. He is not wrong. You are much better with the actual animals than the paperwork. That is why we make such a good team, Zachary said, pulling her closer. You fill in where I lack, and hopefully I do the same for you. You do, Winifred assured him, in more ways than you know. The years continued to be kind to them. Sarah had 3 children of her own, often bringing them to the ranch for visits where Winifred and Zachary spoiled them terribly. William eventually married a neighboring rancher's daughter, a practical woman who loved the land as much as he did, and they built a house on the eastern portion of Zachary and Winifred's property, expanding the ranch while keeping the family close. The twins both attended college, shocking many in their community, but surprising no one who knew Winifred and Zachary. Grace became a teacher like her mother and aunt, while Emma pursued medicine, one of the first female doctors in Texas. Both remained close to home, building their lives within reach of the family that had nurtured them. By 1905, Zachary and Winifred were grandparents many times over, their home often filled with the chaos and joy of multiple generations. Zachary's hair was white now, his movements slower, but his mind remained sharp and his heart full. Winifred moved with the same determination as ever, though she had finally allowed some of the heavier ranch work to pass to younger hands. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. Sarah stood to give a toast, her own children clustered around her. 25 years ago, my aunt married my uncle, and I gained a mother I desperately needed. But more than that, they showed me what marriage could be. Not a prison or a duty, but a partnership, a true meeting of equals who build each other up rather than tear each other down. They taught me that love is not just feeling, but action. It is showing up every day, doing the work, making the choice to honor and respect your partner even when it is hard. Ma, Papa, thank you for loving each other so well, and for loving all of us in the process. There was not a dry eye in the room, least of all Winifred's and Zachary's. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Zachary held his wife close. 25 years, he marveled. It has gone so fast, and been so full, Winifred added. I would not change a moment of it. Well, perhaps I would change the moments when the twins painted the barn walls, or when William decided to bring that injured coyote into the house, or when Zachary silenced her with a kiss, deep and tender, still capable of making her heart race even after all these years. You would not change any of it, and you know it. You love our chaotic, noisy, wonderful life. I love you, Winifred corrected, though she was smiling. The chaotic, noisy, wonderful life is just a bonus. The new century brought changes to Texas and the world beyond. Automobiles began appearing on the roads. Electricity came to Austin and slowly spread to the surrounding areas. The wild frontier was becoming tamed, settled, civilized. But on the Owens Ranch, some things remained constant. Hard work, family dinners, love expressed through action as much as words. Zachary and Winifred adapted to the changes while holding tight to what mattered most. They finally got electric lights in the house in 1910, much to the delight of the grandchildren. William took over most of the day-to-day ranch operations, allowing Zachary to slow down, though he still rode out most mornings to check on things, unable to fully let go. Winifred continued teaching, though now it was her grandchildren who came for lessons, learning reading and arithmetic at her kitchen table just as Sarah had decades before. Her methods had not changed, firm but kind, structured but creative, always making learning relevant to life. On a cool October evening in 1915, Zachary found himself on the porch again, his favorite place, watching the sunset with Winifred beside him as always. They were in their 60s now, both showing their years but still healthy, still vital, still deeply in love. "Do you remember the first time we kissed?" Zachary asked suddenly. "Right here on this porch after I came back from chasing those rustlers." "I remember everything about that night," Winifred said. "I thought I was going to combust from the way you looked at me. Like I was the answer to every question you had ever asked." "You were," Zachary said simply. "You are." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching their grandson playing with a dog in the yard, watched William and his wife heading to their own house for the evening, watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "I hope you know," Zachary said quietly, "that you saved me as much as I like to think I saved you. I was so lost after my sister died, trying to figure out how to be a guardian to Sarah, how to keep the ranch going, how to hold everything together. And then you arrived, this force of nature from Boston, and suddenly everything made sense. You gave me purpose beyond just surviving." Winifred leaned her head on his shoulder. "We saved each other. That is how the best partnerships work. Neither of us was whole alone, but together we are complete." "Together we are complete," Zachary echoed, liking the phrase. "That should be the Owens family motto." The years rolled on, gentle now, unhurried. They celebrated 50 years of marriage in 1930, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The ranch had expanded significantly under William's management, now one of the most successful in Travis County. Sarah had become a school principal, shaping young minds as her aunt had shaped hers. The twins had both made names for themselves in their respective fields, proving that the Owens family produced strong, capable women. At the anniversary celebration, Zachary stood to give a speech, his voice still strong despite his 79 years. "50 years ago, I hired a tutor for my niece. I thought I was just finding someone to teach a little girl her letters and numbers. Instead, I found my soulmate, my partner, my best friend. Winifred, you have made every day of these 50 years an adventure. You challenged me, supported me, loved me even when I was not particularly lovable. You built this family with me, raised our children to be good people, showed all of us what it means to live with integrity and purpose. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, which I would not have thought possible then. Here is to 50 more years. I do not think we are going to get 50 more years," Winifred said with her characteristic practicality, though she was crying. "But however many we get, I will treasure everyone. You are my great love," Zachary Owens. Everything good in my life stems from the moment I stepped off that wagon and saw you standing there, so clearly out of your depth, but so determined to do right by Sarah. You were a good man then, and you are a good man now. I am grateful for every moment we have had together. They kissed to thunderous applause and cheering from their assembled family, the oldest love story in that room and still the strongest. Winifred lived to be 87, remaining sharp and engaged until nearly the end. When she passed peacefully in her sleep in 1940, Zachary held her hand, whispering his love and gratitude even after she could no longer hear. Her funeral was attended by hundreds, testimony to the impact she had made on her adopted community. Former students came from across Texas to pay respects to the woman who had taught them not just reading and writing, but how to think critically and believe in themselves. Zachary followed her 2 years later, at 89, his heart finally giving out after 6 decades of hard use. His last words were her name, and everyone agreed he died as he had lived, completely devoted to his wife. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the vast Texas sky that had witnessed their love story from beginning to end. At Zachary's funeral, Sarah, now in her 70s herself, spoke about her uncle and aunt. They taught me that love is a choice you make every day. It is not just romance, though they had plenty of that. It is partnership, respect, shared work, and shared dreams. My uncle hired my aunt to teach me books, but she taught all of us something far more important, that a life built on love and respect and equality is the richest life possible. Their legacy is not just this ranch or the family they created, but the example they set. Every marriage in this family has been shaped by what they showed us was possible. That is a legacy that will outlast any building or business. The Owens Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapter while honoring the foundation Zachary and Winifred had built. Their story became family legend, told and retold. The Tutor from Boston and the Cowboy from Texas, who found love in the most unexpected way. In later years, one of their great-granddaughters, a history professor, compiled their letters and journals into a book about frontier life and marriage in the late 19th century. The book became a minor bestseller, with readers captivated by the genuine love and respect that shone through every written word. Letters Zachary had written to Winifred during his rare trips away revealed a man deeply in love and not afraid to express it. Winifred's journals showed a woman who had found her place in the world, who had built a life far beyond anything she had imagined sitting in Boston. The ranch house still stood in the 21st century, carefully preserved by the family, now a museum of sorts where descendants gathered for reunions. The porch where Zachary and Winifred had spent so many evenings still faced west, catching those spectacular Texas sunsets. The room where Winifred first taught Sarah was restored to look as it had in 1879, with books and chalkboard and simple wooden desk. Visitors to the house often remarked on the feeling of peace there, of love that had soaked into the very walls. The bedroom where Winifred and Zachary had shared their lives still had photographs of them at various ages. Young and bright-eyed on their wedding day, middle-aged and confident with their children around them, elderly and silver-haired but still holding hands at their 50th anniversary. The favorite photograph, the one reproduced in the history book and hung in the ranch house parlor, was taken on their 40th anniversary. Zachary and Winifred sat on the porch steps, his arm around her shoulders, her head leaning on his, both looking at the camera with expressions of complete contentment. The photographer had captured something ineffable, that quality of two people who had truly become one while remaining wholly themselves. Beneath the photograph, a plaque bore an inscription taken from one of Winifred's journal entries. "I came to Texas to teach a child her letters. Instead, I learned what it means to live fully, love deeply, and build a legacy that matters. Together we are complete." And they were. A cowboy who needed help raising his niece and a teacher who needed a fresh start. Two people who found each other across distances and differences and built something lasting. Their love story was not grand in the way of novels, with dramatic gestures and poetic declarations. It was something better. Real, lived daily in small acts of care and large acts of devotion, in teaching lessons and mending fences, in raising children and building a business, in choosing each other again and again for more than 60 years. Zachary had hired a tutor for his niece, and in doing so, found the woman who would teach him more than books could ever contain. Winifred had answered an advertisement for a teaching position and found a home, a family, and a love that transformed her entire life. Together, they proved that the best love stories are not about perfection, but about partnership, about two imperfect people building something beautiful together. Their descendants still gathered at the ranch every year, drawn by the pull of history and family. Children ran through the same yards where William and the twins had played. Adults sat on the porch at sunset, just as Zachary and Winifred had. The land changed hands within the family, but never left it, each generation honoring the legacy of love and hard work that had begun with a cowboy's desperate advertisement and an Eastern teacher's brave answer. The story of Zachary and Winifred Owens became more than just family history. It became a touchstone, a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that true partnership meant bringing out the best in each other, that a life built on respect and equality and genuine affection was worth any sacrifice. Their story proved that sometimes the person you need is not who you expect, arriving at the perfect moment to change everything. And in the end, is that not what the best love stories teach us? That love is not about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone perfectly suited to you, someone who challenges and supports you, someone with whom you can build a life that matters. Zachary needed someone to teach his niece, but Winifred taught him how to love again, how to be vulnerable, how to share his life fully with another person. And Zachary taught Winifred that her strength and intelligence were not flaws to be hidden but gifts to be celebrated, that she could be fully herself and still be loved completely. Together, they built a legacy that endured long after they were gone, in the land they tended, the children they raised, the example they set. Their love story began with an advertisement in a Boston newspaper and ended under the Texas stars they both loved, encompassing 6 decades of partnership, devotion, and the kind of love that truly teaches us what it means to live well and love deeply. That was the real lesson Winifred taught, the one that mattered more than any book. That love, true love, is not just about feeling but about choice, commitment, and the courage to build something lasting with another flawed, beautiful human being. And in teaching that lesson, she and Zachary created something that would never fade, a love story for the ages, born in the wild heart of Texas and enduring forever.